This podcast provides discussions on sensitive topics that may trigger some listeners. Content in this podcast should not be construed as medical or doctor-recommended advice. If any listener has a medical concern, consult with a registered professional.
Dear Dysfunctional Diaries.
Okay, so I came to uni, the one thing I always wanted to give a go was just sitting in front of a microphone, like everyone talks about, like just starting a podcast and just having a go with it. But this is actually something that I do really enjoy, and it's fun. It's good fun. If I wanted to have all these people be, really vulnerable with me, I need to be vulnerable about why I want to start a podcast. The next thing I wanted to talk about after the guests and the advice was future plans to do with the diary, Dysfunctional Diaries. Okay, so there's gonna be episode 4. It's bizarre talking to a camera, but it's gonna have to work. Episode 4. It's gonna be it's a solo podcast, obviously, as you can tell, because other 3 were guests, and I think that's fine. The guests were amazing, like it was so much fun. But solo episode is mainly I've got talking points, but it's gonna be to just sort of learn more about the podcast itself, learn more about myself, and then just sort of explain what I want to do with the podcast if I want to keep doing it. But this will be released, months down the line, so it's fine. To start off, I wanted to say thank you to the 3 people who came on: Dion, Ella, Dan. Honestly, it was amazing interviewing them. Like, it was so much fun. It wasn't even an interview. It was a conversation. Like, it wasn't even an interview. It was just free flowing. It was really good. But the whole point of a solo one, as I said, is to focus less on the guests and make sure that I can show like some gratitude, and that I can give reasoning behind why I want to start a podcast. Because I think if I wanted to have all these people be, really vulnerable with me, I need to be vulnerable about why I want to start a podcast and why I want to ask them these questions. And so I'm going to be looking over here at points because I've got talking notes. So basically, the first thing I want to bring up is like the concept and the theme of the podcast, Dysfunctional Diaries. It actually started off as I was going to make a documentary on just Dion. I wasn't going to call it Dysfunctional Diaries, but basically I ended up doing a little switcheroo and turning it into a podcast, which 100% suits better, because I think the podcast idea I had initially works better as a documentary, and the documentary idea I had, this, is a lot better as a podcast. It's a lot better to sit down and talk to someone, just have like an authentic conversation, rather than make like a whole, documentary on one of the people, where I can have tons of people on and talk to them, when I'm doing this. So, theme of the podcast is basically everyone has dysfunction in their lives, no matter who you are. Like, it can be tiny or it can be huge. Like, it can be like Dion had with like some really, really deep stuff, or it can be really simple and something really small that you can, because everyone has it. Everyone has some sort of dysfunction in their lives. And so yeah, I think it's trying to be as like authentic as possible, because that's kind of how a podcast this style has to be. Everyone has dysfunction in their lives, and the aim of this podcast is to help normalize having issues and personal struggles that everyone gets to work through. And that's not normalize in the sense that like I want to make having a bunch of random different issues really dead normal. That's not at all the point of this. It's to like normalize the fact that they are there. You're going to have some weird things happen, some issues happen in your life, but everyone works through them eventually. No matter who you are, no matter how big, no matter how small, everyone works through them. And so it just sort of normalizes that sense of struggle actually isn't always a negative thing, because all those different people who I spoke to all worked through it, and they became either more themselves or bettered themselves through it. And it was just so interesting to hear the different sides of it. So it's always been something that I've wanted to do and have a go at. And I mean, podcasting it's podcasting. Everyone wants to do a podcast at some point. And I've got this cool setup, studio, lights, everything like that. So it makes it a whole lot easier. And I've always wanted to do it. Like I came to uni, the one thing I always wanted to give a go was just sitting in front of a microphone, like everyone talks about, like just starting a podcast and just having a go with it. But this is actually something that I do really enjoy. And it's fun. It's good fun. So yeah. Second thing is mainly just to talk about like me and why I want to do it. Not that I imagine that, too many people are listening who don't know me, but you never know. It's basically I don't know, what can I start with? I grew up in Jersey, moved over to Leeds here to do uni work. But the main reason that I think I wanted to do a podcast was because coming to the UK, you meet like so many different people. Like it's a real variety change when you come from Jersey, which is kind of like a one-dimensional spot to live in sometimes anyway. Though don't get me wrong, there's different types of all different types of people, but I think in the UK you just have such a range of people and stories, and you realise that everyone lives differently. So it's definitely probably the move that made me want to start a podcast. I think it definitely made me think more about having people on and having like a guest-based one, which I've always wanted to do. And I've met some interesting ass people being in Leeds. Leeds is bizarre, but it's a proper nice place. It's really nice, and yeah, met some really interesting people here. People who I know I'm probably going to know for the rest of my life for sure. So I thought, why not start a podcast just based on having. Because I know I'm not the only person that finds these people interesting who I know. Like, I find them fascinating, It's just the stories and, like, what goes on. So I thought, you know what? If I find it interesting, somebody else has to. Or, maybe, but, I just think it's got to be interesting to somebody else. It can't just be me. But, yeah. So, grew up in Jersey. Currently in my second year doing TV production, so hence the nice studio and everything like that, and the production level. It could be better, and it will be better, but it's definitely a start. So really enjoying it. It's like proper good. But the podcast, this here, is for a project that I'm doing, but it's also because I actually would 100% keep doing this, which I'll touch on later. But it's something that's so interesting. It's definitely I've done a ton of stuff while I've been here. I've done a range. I've done just from sitting on an auto cue thing, whirling a wheel, to directing a show, to recording out on location and filming a documentary and all that sort of stuff. So you get a range, but without a doubt, out of everything, this is what I've enjoyed the most, like by far. It's not that I haven't enjoyed the rest. The rest it's all been so much fun. I can't complain about going out with cameras and on location and filming things. That's what everyone, no one can. People have harder times at uni, but yeah, it's just been so much fun. And the podcast, I've only done 4 episodes. This is the 4th one, and I can already tell that I'd want to do it, like keep doing it. So it's a food for thought. But yeah, so I kind of thought that it would be great to sort of, if I expect people to be, open, sensitive, vulnerable when I'm talking to them about really serious stuff, I need to give some reasoning behind why I wanted to start this podcast specifically, because I could have done anything. I could have just sat in a room and talked and just chatted like with anyone. It could have been about anything, any topic. It could be sport related. It could have been, what I'm getting to is, why did I do this? Why did I do Dysfunctional Diaries? And there's a couple of reasons. One is open discussions. I think it's so unheard of for people just to be able to sit and ask questions and just admit they don't know. Like, not that I'm some leading person in the field because I've just started this, but I haven't seen anything else where I could just sit down with someone who is transgender and just ask questions. Like, I can't think of anything else. I've seen anything like that. Like, I've just sit down and ask some genuine questions, not sit here and, do anything else, just ask questions because I am curious and I'm interested and I want to find out. I just feel, there's not a lot of, I feel like it should be so much more normal to have something like that, just to admit, like, before me and Ella sat down, I sat there and said, correct me when I get things wrong, because I'm going to get things wrong. And it was just so interesting. She was so laid back, in fairness, and it was so nice of her, and she was a legend. But it was just, I don't know a lot. I think open discussions don't really happen as much. Like, you're not allowed, you're wrong if you don't know the answers already. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to if I can't ask? So it was, something that I really wanted to do. That's why I wanted to bring up, topics such as the ones that I have brought up, which are sensitive, and they relate to people who I've met before and who I know and who I'm friends with. So it's I just don't know a lot of places where I can sit here and just ask questions to a transgender person about being transgender, or I can sit here and ask someone who has experienced eating disorders about eating disorders and how it makes them feel. Because it's things are ongoing. Dan will forever have autism. Dion is dealing with it because I don't think it ever leaves mentally. Physically, it works and you can get yourself better, but mentally it's always going to be there. And Ella will forever be transgender. So it's definitely just a question that I like the idea of just being able to have an open discussion. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is the fact that I think it should be a lot more normal than it is to talk about struggles and like issues that you have. Just because I feel like, especially in like male circles, there's such a stereotype, and it's as if like people act like guys don't talk at all about anything. It does happen, but it is still less common, and that is one of the reasons behind having like Dan and Dion on. I thought, these are two guys who I respect a lot, but they, have, struggles and issues and things like that. And it should be normal to be able to talk about it, even in like a public setting like this, where this will be on YouTube and Spotify and people will be able to watch it and I'll be promoting it. And it's just something that you can talk about. The more that people talk about it, the more it becomes the sense that, it's normal to have it, but you can work through it. And you can cope with it, and there's things to do. So it's definitely another reason why, just, to normalise the people struggle, people have issues. I'm not saying everyone does, but it's, most people do. In my opinion, everyone will, no matter how big or small. So that's another reason. I think also, not that I'll hopefully build this to a good point, and we'll see where this goes, but I think it helps for people to be able to find a level of like relatability, because, if there was for anyone out there listening to be they end up watching and they end up actually sitting there being like, just out of the 3 episodes I've done so far, they struggle with something. It's relatable and it shows. I think that's always like the big thing is, somebody just sitting there and giving it a go, and understanding that, oh yeah, other people are struggling with this as well. Let me just actually figure out what I'm doing, wrong, or what I'm doing correct. So it's a learning curve, basically. That's the whole thing behind it. But everyone has it different, and so it's gonna be a wee bit different. But the last sort of reason was because, in fairness, it's not a selfish reason. I think it's pretty valid, but it's basically because I actually am interested to sort of educate myself on these different topics and to be able to actually just think, I don't know all the answers, but I can own up to not knowing all of the answers, which is something that I've definitely been trying to find out a bit more about. It's just to sort of self-educate and just think, I don't know all the answers. I don't know all the right terminology, all the right ways to talk about things, all the right ways to do certain things. But it's a whole lot easier when you have other people who have gone through certain things, certain struggles, certain issues, to be able to just, actually sit down and be like, right, well, I want to understand, and I want to learn, and I want to help other people who are interested in it to be able to do it as well. So it's something that I've just thought. I think it would be good to be able to educate myself on it. A whole broad range of different subjects. It would be interesting as hell to just sit back and be like, you know what? I'm just fully going to sit here and admit I don't know all the right answers. I don't know all the right things to say. I don't know all the right terminology. Am I allowed to ask a trans person what their real name was, or dead name was? Sorry, you should be able to ask, because if you don't ask, you're not going to find out. And so it goes without saying that I don't know all the answers, but I'm asking the right people. So I'm asking the right people about the right subjects that I want to probably better educate myself on. So speaking of those guests, I got each of them to write down I'm going to do this as a reoccurring thing with more guests when I do more episodes. But I got each of them to write down the name and just like a quote or a bit of advice that I could go through today. And I'll keep doing these solo podcasts because it's quite fun. It is strange talking to a camera, but it's good fun to be able to sit back and actually just, see how it's going. But yeah, I got each of them to write down a bit of a bit of advice or a quote or something. And I actually have not read these yet. This is not fake. I have not read these yet. So Daniel Smithers said, I can't even read the handwriting. The mountain does not shrink because of how tall you believe it is. Which is, I'm trying to process that. The mountain does not shrink because of how tall you believe it is. I think that's kind of like sort of, a mountain out of a molehill sort of advice, which is true. A mountain does not shrink because of how tall you believe it is. If the more emphasis you put on something, the more you're going to see it as a task or an issue that is just unconsolable or insurmountable, which is actually a good piece of advice. I didn't know Dan would put that, in fairness. So, yeah, thank you, Dan, again. Dion put, don't destroy yourself caring too much about what other people think or are doing. Just do what makes you happy. Which is surprising. I didn't think Dion would put something quite so emotive, which is sweet. Dion is not usually writing these sort of things down. But that is dead on. I mean, I'm sat here talking to a camera on a podcast that I thought of, basically about 2 months ago, maybe a bit less, and I'm talking to a camera, and people probably think it's a bit odd, but that's fine. But it's true. Do what makes do what makes you happy, man. It's good. I didn't think I'd enjoy this as much as I do, but without a doubt, this is top tier what I've been wanting to do, and it's made me beyond psyched and happy to be able to give this all a go and just try my own thing. So definitely good advice. Don't destroy yourself caring too much about what other people think or are doing. Just do what makes you happy. And then finally Ella, which actually, in fairness, Ella warned me about her handwriting, but this is actually probably the best handwriting out of the lot. Don't feel pressured to be anyone you're not. Even if you feel anxious, one day you can be who you'd like. So, yeah, true. I think that's really suiting. I think it's definitely a problem that a lot of people have nowadays, that they feel like they can't just be themselves, even in smaller things. That sounds like, the way that's written sounds like it's a lot more than it is, which it is definitely for some people. But even just like, don't feel pressure to be anyone you're not. There's even just like hanging out with certain people, or like if you don't feel like you're in this right like friend group or any of that, like it's just sometimes people, it's just like they put through those minor things because other people are doing so, and it's like you don't need to. Like, I get that obviously it's easier said than done, but you don't need to. You know, it's something that can easily be looked around or turned around or any of that sort of stuff. But it's true, yeah. It's that applies, all very good bits of advice, all very good quotes. I don't feel like I explained Dan's very well because I don't think I understood it completely. But you know what? There you go. But yeah, I think it's true that you should be able to just you don't have to change what you're doing just because other people aren't doing what you're doing. You know, if you're the only one doing it, then you know, chances are that you're doing the right thing. Because I mean, I don't know anyone else doing this, and I'm enjoying it. So yeah, so very good piece of advice. I'd probably say they all resonate. What would resonate most with me? Probably Dion, the don't destroy yourself caring too much about what other people think or are doing. Just do what makes you happy, which is very true. I think that's truer than a lot of things. But that definitely resonates. All three of them resonate in some way if you really think about it, when it comes to any sort of thing in your life, any aspect. But very good pieces of advice. I actually really enjoyed that. But yeah, listen to all those pieces of advice. They're people who have gone through their fair share of struggles, and if they're the ones that are writing it, then it's got to be true. So I'll definitely be taking them into account, and I'll be keeping them in the book, because the next thing I wanted to talk about after the guests and the advice was future plans to do with the diary, Dysfunctional Diaries, as I was calling it. But it is to be continued. I'd like to think. I probably will. I think I will. I'll hold myself to it because I really enjoy doing it. It's a busy time at the moment, but I definitely think that there will be future episodes. I'd love to continue this. It would be really fun. It would be something I'd really enjoy doing. And it would definitely be something I'd really like to continue doing, just to have a go at. But future plans is to be continued. I'd like to think this will probably be the end of, I don't know, season 1. Seasons don't really make sense in a podcast, but you got to call it something, don't you, to put on a YouTube video. This will probably be the end of season 1. It will just be 4 episodes. This is the sort of test. I'm seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. But there's going to be a book of guests. The guest book will continue. It's just to keep track of who I've been interviewing and who I've spoken to, and once, hopefully down the line, once this has gotten bigger and gotten better, I'll be able to look back and look at these first couple of episodes and actually read through what we spoke about, and rewatch. And that's why I love that it's all here, because it's all people who I've met who I might not know as far down the line, or I might do. So it's just so great to be able to look back at it. But the book of guests will continue. It will be a better book. This is pretty pathetic, but it'll be like a big book, like a I don't know, like a journal, which sounds a bit soppy, but you know, it's definitely something that would be good to continue. The book of guests, new segments. I think it's nice to just have sort of like an authentic feel. I feel like segments are quite forced. I like this segment. In the solo ones, I don't mind having segments. They're fun, you know, just doing the advice by guests. They're fun, but I think the rest of it would, I don't think I'd do any other segments necessarily. I might have a think. I'll evolve it. I'll see what other people think. But segments can definitely happen, and then possible release schedules. This is going to be weekly, so I think weekly just suits. It's enough work. because I'm doing this on my own. So it's enough work, a weekly schedule, but it's definitely something that I could keep up with. So release schedule would likely be weekly. Don't expect one after this one to come a week. It's when I'd done filming everything, and it would be weekly, possibly when I start a season again. Because you have to name it something. It's just you have to put a season number on it. Otherwise, it just looks like nice. It's like categorized. It's organizational. It's good. So after this episode, we'll have to see. But release schedule will probably continue to be weekly, continue to be at that pace, because it's a good pace. And a weekly episode, it's good. I think it's good. It gives a chance for that episode to sit, and gives chance for that next episode to be made, and for trailers to be put out and things like that. So but other than that, I think that will probably be the end of the solo episode. But I have very much enjoyed doing this. Again, I want to thank Dan. I want to thank Dion. I want to thank Ella. I want to thank Harry, who was sat there. He's not there now. But he was sat there for all the podcasts. He was checking all the audio. He was checking all the camera stuff. He was basically keeping it running. So big, massive thank you to Harry and everyone. That'll probably be the end of this one.